Hej,
Hej, godmorgen.
godmorgen. Jeg så den film, hvad hedder det, Lykkepære? Lykkepære?
Ja.
Det var ikke en af de mest brillante.
Nej, okay.
Jeg så den til slut.
Okay, jeg har ikke set den, så.
Det er bedre, da jeg fandt ud af, at jeg kunne se den på dansk.
Ja.
Jeg synes, det engelsk lød lidt mærkeligt. Men
Nå, okay, det var på engelsk, ja, jeg har faktisk ikke set den, så.
jeg troede, du havde set den.
Nej, ja, det er
Okay.
filmen, det er Portland Book Club, som læser bogen, så jeg tænkte, det var meget sjovt for dem at sige det, og alle sammen ligesom at følge med. Ja.
Okay, bogen er sikkert bedre.
Jamen, så må jeg se den på dansk.
Ja, jeg vidste ikke, man kunne trykke, og at man kunne se den på mange sprog, men så fandt jeg ud af, at jeg behøvede ikke at se den på engelsk.
Nå, ja.
På en vis måde, det så så falsk ud.
Ja, især når man kan tale dansk, så.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. We will give everyone about like 3 to 5 minutes just to log on, and then we'll get started.
So all these people that have a line through their, I don't know, audio, they're not here, or they are there without pictures?
Yeah, they're here. My microphone is just turned off, so it's muted.
Okay. And their pictures too.
Yeah, that's their videos off. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually have a tape covering my camera eye.
Oh yeah, they say they're always watching.
Uninvited visionaries. I don't know what they are. Voyeurs, but it's on. Yeah. This is really me. And you see the flag? I found my flag. I read your email. So do you want us at the end to wave it?
I think I'm gonna.
How have you pictured this?
Yeah, I'm gonna do a video, but I'll probably just do a still shot. So if I don't know if I can fit everyone in one screen. We'll see how many people are there, but I'll just do a screenshot of all of us.
Okay. I actually have several flags here because one of my friends was cleaning out, and she's been carrying around 2 full-size Danish flags for many years, and decided enough was enough.
Yeah.
So I said I would find them good homes.
Okay.
So far they haven't gotten further than mine, but
yeah. Yeah, they're useful when you're Danish for birthdays.
Yeah, I actually hung them up for St. Hans. Yes, I was surprised people didn't know when St. Hans is. It's the 23rd. You light the bonfire, and then the 24th, I'm telling my husband to keep quiet, and the 24th, like it's the day, but the celebration is the evening. The 23rd. Yeah, you know that.
Too. Yeah, there was one year at the DACR where we hit it on the 23rd. So it was that Friday, I think. Or maybe it was 2 years, actually. It was a Friday and then a Saturday. So
we always hit it in Quebec because it's the national holiday here. They celebrate, their national patron saint is St. Hans, like Saint John Baptiste, John the Baptist.
Yeah.
So, no doubt.
Celebration.
Yes.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like Sankt Hans in Denmark, though, with all the big bonfires on the beach.
Well, here, yes, lighting fires is very much part of the tradition.
Oh, good.
They do have bonfires that evening, and but the Danish Canadian Society has. We've just had to move out of town. They no longer allow big bonfires in town. But But the first one I was at that I can remember was in the Northwest Territories when I lived there, and we had suddenly had a Danish butcher who had come to us via Greenland, and she was very energetic, and she got permission to be, I'm not sure she got permission, but she built a huge bonfire on one of the local beaches, and it was nice sandy beaches up there. Of course, the midnight sun, it didn't get dark, but we had our witch, and and they're now what are they called? The Northern Vikings or something like that.
Okay.
Canada's most northern Danish club.
Yeah.
Still going strong.
Viking, interesting.
Yeah, after, because my daughter would only have been, well, she would only have just been born, so like that's almost 40 years ago that that event happened. So
Oh yeah.
shows you what one good butcher can do for one town. And she also started making all the Danish delicacies, so you could go out to the local butcher's store and get everything you wanted.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's always nice to have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Rare.
Yeah, they used to
Rare
have the
in
big
my life.
bonfires here in Seattle too, or in the area around it, but yeah, not anymore. I tried to do a small one on the beach, but it wasn't quite the same.
Yeah.
All right, it looks like everybody is slowly coming in here. I'll do a little bit of a shorter, I think everyone was here yesterday, but I'll do a short introduction. So Bodil is here joining us from Laval, Canada. And she will be talking about the some books that her mom wrote, Agnes Jelhof Jensen, and the last 3 books in the series here that we're talking about in DACR. So I hope you had a chance to watch the video this morning, and I will let Bodil take it away.
Well, actually, I think I talked about all her books because I decided why not. And you might have more of a chance, some of you, to read some of the English language books, because I noticed some of them are for sale, like on Amazon, whatever. And we still have, my parents had this wonderful house. They moved in after I left home, and being the youngest, so none of the kids lived in the house, but it had a bomb shelter. A nuclear bomb shelter. It was a house built in the 50s. The only thing was the door to this nuclear bomb shelter was just plywood. So it was great for storing furs and all the vegetables and everything from the garden. And there, after my mother passed away in 2007, we found a couple of cases of books, including like No One Must Know and Old Age Can Wait. And we split them evenly between my sister and myself. I used to go around to the farmers markets in Alberta and sell the books, which was fun. But there's still some left if anybody wants to read them. I mean, they're really quite funny. My mother had a good sense of humor, typical Danish sense of humor. Yes. So I'm ready for questions. I don't want to just talk for 3/4 of an hour. I don't know if you want to hear me for 3/4 of an hour. So, anybody have any questions?
Feel free to chime in if anybody has anything. I'm happy to start with a question.
Okay, great.
Okay, yeah, you talked about the new book that's coming out next year that you wanted to talk about for DACR 2021. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, basically, it's I would say I'm more the editor than the author. It's a collection of all the documents pertaining to World War II, not just World War II, but focusing on the life, the story of my grandparents. I mentioned yesterday that they were picked up in the Danish razzia on October 1, 1943. They were transported to Theresienstadt, which you may know was the model concentration camp for Jews that was established in Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic, just outside of Prague. And it was not a model. It was just about as awful as all the other camps, except that if you were going to be killed, you were actually transported to another camp. They didn't have the ovens there. And my grandmother did not survive that experience. My grandfather did. And during their incarceration. People, mostly his family, mostly his children, mostly my Aunt Dot, sent cards. Uh, they were like postcards. You can form a rectangle with your fingers, and that's about as big as they were. And were written in German because they had to pass the censors. And also my grandparents sent out letters. And I called this love letters from Theresienstadt, because what eventually happened is when my grandfather left the camp, he smuggled out cards, those that hadn't actually arrived at their destinations. And just by happenstance, they were safe all these years. And I received them a few years ago from my cousin. And we decided that we would create a book, which of course means I'm doing it, but she's at least in the background encouraging me, and put in everything we had about our grandparents, which is not a lot. But we do have these letters, which seem to be quite a unique collection. And if you think about that, they were number one in German, number two, they had to go through a censor as to what could be said in the letters. But just, you know, the miracle, they survived. And everything, you know, this whole story is not without drama. I go back as to how my grandparents grew up. We have correspondence between my grandmother and her husband, my grandfather, in the 20s. It's all very interesting, and stuff that happened after they died. We have their wills. A lot of interesting stuff. So it's a little family history, which will be in German, Danish, and English. So the original documents are however we found them, and then they're translated into English. So it'll be sort of like one side will be the original language, and the other side will be the translation. And then, of course, we have photos, some of which you saw in the video. The one of Josephine Baker, I don't know if it's going in, probably not. Because I'm trying to, you know, focus on my grandparents and not focus on their children, most of whom were quite successful, and you know, have fantastic stories themselves. But you know, it's nice to have control of your material, and this is sufficiently little or small. The book will be maybe 150 pages. So let's say we have maybe 75 documents to present, and you can sort of have control of that, because much of it we don't know. And that's why I'm really so happy that my mother wrote these. And also, I didn't, although I read the books when they came out, you know, 20, 30 years ago, I didn't really appreciate how much information she told about her own family. And the whole, like the two memoirs, Midmen and Glemmer, are almost like a premonition of what's going to happen. If any of you have read them, she talks about her mother, and that, for example, they were not allowed to bury her. They were not there when she was buried. They were not allowed to place, if you know, the tradition of placing a rock on a grave site when you visit it, whether it's, you know, recent or a long time ago, just sort of to acknowledge that you were there. That did not happen. And these things are all hinted at or discussed in those two books. So I was quite happy that this conference gave me the opportunity or the necessity to reread those books
Yeah.
or listen to them. Actually, that's the way to go, because they are like these tapes that I have. One of Denmark's leading actresses, Lena Boe Petersen, like leading at that time. She read the two books, and when the Saga Egmont, who is doing who did the ebooks, is also going to make these into available electronically. But their production schedule was delayed because of COVID.
If you
You
send
can
me
get
the,
them eventually in paper.
yeah.
Yes.
If you send me the links, I'm happy to send them out to everyone in an email to the Amazon links and everything. We do have a couple questions that came in. Bridget Lois is asking, how many drafts would you go through before settling on a final draft? Did some works require more drafts than others? Did anyone serve as a kind of sounding board or reader before you sent things off?
If you're talking about my mother's authorship, she, for example, Dilemma, which is 120 pages, she sat down and wrote it in 14 days. But her technique, how many pages is it actually? 126. Her technique was to think about things. So she had this fantastic memory, and her theory was once it was in your brain, you never lost it. So she would polish her silver, vacuum, do the dishes, whatever needed doing, and have everything worked out, and then sit down at a table and write it all by hand in scribblets. And then she would sit and type it. Now she was before the age of computers. We tried to get her on to a computer, but she was on a Selectric, with those electric with a ball so she could change her type. And her short stories in her brain, and she just sat and typed them. Like, think about it, over 100 short stories a year. That's the way she did it. So you can say she lived in sort of a fantasy world, but she was very much here. I mean, there was nothing missing in that home. Nothing, it was organized. Food was on the table. She took care of my father as though, we had 3 servants in the house or something. From the age of 50, he had very bad rheumatoid arthritis. So he needed a lot of care. And she was more than willing to be that caregiver. That was just part of her nature. As for me, when I write, well, did I bring that book up? Sana and Morgana Go to School, which is my children's book. It's not available in the US because we can't certify that the ink is child friendly. But nobody to date has died, and it's been out 10 years. So if you want a copy, I still have some copies. But at any rate, this is a children's book is probably harder to write than a longer book because every word counts. So every word has to be exact. My mother, when she sent material into these recognized publishers, Christian Erikson and Gullenday, there would be editors sitting there correcting any mistakes that she made, but she made very few mistakes. Her Danish was exceptional. Sana Morgana is done on a computer. Like I too wrote it by hand, and then I typed it in. And I went through at least 20 versions of it. But it doesn't mean I started from scratch. No, you just keep changing a word. And then if you're smart, you keep your your revisions so you can look back and think, oh, was that really good? Was that not good? And before you go to print, you have to have a copy editor. You have to have another set of eyes. And I'm so fortunate that one of my close friends is an exceptional copy editor. She even won an Oscar for the work she did on a film here from Quebec. So she is exceptional. She was my copy editor. She still is my copy editor. And that is highly esteemed profession. People who can read letter for letter, who know their language so well that they can put it into acceptable, whatever language you're writing in, acceptable English, that will be understood. Because after all, you want to communicate. You know, I've never understood a poem that is so complicated, I can't understand it. Well, obviously I don't understand it, but I don't even know why people bother. Like, even when I practice law, you simplify language. You have to communicate. So make your language easy to understand and get away from these big words, get away from these words that are only understood by the trade. And a children's book, you have to get in the language that those children understand. So, but at the same time, you have to appeal to whoever's going to buy it, which is not the child, but the parent or the grandparent, whatever. So, yeah, this this book. What I love about it are the illustrations. You can see. Kirsten Peterson, who is the illustrator, another Dane, one generation out, just has a fantastic imagination, and she's a graduate of the Emily Carr. It used to be the School of Art. Emily Carr, you may know, is a famous Canadian painter who did Indian native art, the totem poles from the Pacific coast. And now it's become a university, but she went to Kirsten went to that art school, and I babysat her when she was born. That's how I have that connection.
Yeah.
Boda. Hello, Boda. This is Ove Rasmussen. I'm from Svendborg, Denmark, and I enjoyed the videos very much. And there were some points that you brought out in the videos that I'd like to talk about. My family left Denmark in 1956. And once we left Denmark, my father kind of insisted that the family stop speaking Danish because he felt that the children would do better in school if we just focused on speaking English. But your Danish is very good still. So did your family continue speaking Danish in the household?
Absolutely. My parents, notably my mother, felt it was silly for them to teach us English. Besides that, we did very well. Now, I'm not saying that everybody could do it. I went to school without knowing a word of English. We came in March, my sister even more so, because she was already in grade 2 in Denmark. So she went to school and knew absolutely no English. And after a few weeks, she got into her regular class. There wasn't, this coddling or trying to, I wouldn't call it coddling. It was just, you jump in, either you swim or you sink. And she does have a gift for languages. She was a French and Spanish major when she went to university.
Yes, that was very much my experience also. I got dumped into the second half of first grade, no English, and I just kind of sat there and listened for
Mhm.
for a good long time, but I learned the language,
Yeah.
the English language, and I lost my Danish language.
Well,
Now,
we didn't. Yeah, we
your,
didn't
your,
lose.
yeah. Now your parents very quickly became Canadian citizens
Yeah.
after being in Canada for just the required number of years. Now, my mother and father decided never to become U.S. citizens. They retained their Danish citizenship for their lifetimes. So that's a little different
Yeah.
than our joined experiences. But in one of your videos, you mentioned that you felt that your mother really didn't want to leave Denmark. And I feel the same way about my mother. Her head was in the U.S., but her heart was all in Denmark. And after a period of time, she made multiple trips back to Denmark to see her parents and her brothers and sisters. But I guess my last comment that was in the video, you encourage people to write their story. And I want to thank you for that. And someday I'll find the time to sit and write my story.
Well, a page a day, will get you there. So it might be something you do when you wake up in the morning, or, like schedule it in, because none of us know when our memories are going to start fading. And there's no time like the present. So, but as far as my mother, my parents traveled often to Denmark, especially as their finances improved. But I wouldn't say that their hearts were there. They at a certain point, I think they lost touch with the political situation. They weren't keeping up with anything. And as their own family, um, um, as they died, I became less and less requirement to travel to Denmark. I will say though that my mother had a passport up until the day she died. I mean, she was also driving her car, so she had ambitions. Like, she got a new passport around her 90th birthday, and so she definitely had ambitions to travel again. I think what helped, of course, is having grandchildren on this side of the Atlantic, and also she tried to integrate herself as much as possible into the Edmonton social scene, and part of that was these charity projects that she ran.
There's a question from Ingrid Salmon here. Ingrid is asking, you mentioned yesterday that your parents wanted to get away from Denmark, partially to get a fresh start after the war. Were they able to leave the war memories behind them, or were they still haunted by those events? Did life in Canada provide a successful break from Denmark?
Well, I cannot tell you whether they were haunted. I can tell you one thing: my dad never spoke of the war, and neither did my mother. Never. Nothing whatsoever about it. And in fact, it was only after they briefly, I was briefly let into, what had gone on when I was sent to Norway to work at the embassy, Canadian embassy there, and so they realized that I would be coming in contact with my Danish family, and maybe I better learn something about what had gone on before I was shocked by what my relatives might tell me. And so I got a thumbnail sketch of what had gone on. And then it was after we moved, my husband and I and our two kids moved here to Quebec in '91, that I actually got more of the which was the 50th anniversary of the rescue of the Jews in Denmark, my mother decided, well, obviously a year or so before, that she was going to tell the story of what, from her perspective, what happened. And that's when Dilemma was written. But basically, as to whether, well, we can assume they got a clean break. They were not members of any organizations that in any way, like a veterans group that in any way memorialized the events. I can tell you one interesting story. My brother, who grew up in Denmark, because at the time of the divorce, his father got custody. So, but he came to my mother's memorial service in 2007. And many of my mother's friends were there, Danish friends, who had known her all her life, some of them in Denmark. And they came up and shook his hand, and they were so happy to see him, and so happy to see that my mother had reconciled with her son, because this was not, something you gossip with. And I can tell you, he dropped into our life when he was 40. I mean, I didn't know anything about him. And he came into our life when he was 40. I celebrated, everything with him since that time. But these friends of my parents came up to my brother and said, we knew all about you, but we never talked about you. So my brother was saying, like, well, there was like a conspiracy of silence. And nobody ever said anything about the war. Like, I can't remember any of my parents' friends ever talking about the war. And they were all there. They were all immigrants in the early 50s. And they never talked about it. Never talked about it. So it's all been a revelation to me as an adult. So I can't, the break, well, I can tell you my parents were very successful. My dad finished his career at the Research Council of Alberta as a senior head of the engineering research department, despite his terrible arthritis. And my sister and I both, were at university, have had successful careers, and grandkids. Nobody went to jail. I visited many jails in my capacity as a criminal lawyer, but I've always, been able to press the button and leave. Yeah, one would have to say it was a success, because I can't say I wasn't happy. I never, and whatever it takes to put yourself in a new place, I think basically you look at the present and you look at the future and you go forward without regret. It would have been different, but I don't think, I think maybe if there was longing, it was because the winters in Edmonton were so long. And, by the time you were seeing spring flowers in Denmark, it was still another 2 months of snow in Edmonton. And so I was really amused to read that my mother loved winter in Denmark. But I guess by the time you get 4 months of it in Edmonton, you had your share. Anyway.
There's another question here from Bridget Lois. Were her short stories at all fantasy? Were they set in a certain time or place? Who was the audience primarily? Well,
first of all, she wrote for one of for Who's Oh Yeah, which to which my family had a subscription. So my mother had to faithfully write to that publication on a weekly basis, or maybe it only came out twice a month, I don't know, which was the greeting to my grandmother. And who's, oh yeah, is like all happy stories, you know, boy gets girl, something is resolved so that everybody lives happily ever after. So that was the nature of my mother's stories. But the one I talked about, Eula England, the Christmas angel, is actually talks about a child growing up and deciding, you know, who's providing Christmas here. And the conclusion is everybody needs a Christmas angel, even if that angel is your own parents. You know, like the sentiment is so sweet. And I think my mother was not interested in horror. She was interested in what was good and what would help people, you know, see the goodness in life. So no, it wasn't science fiction. It was very well written because she was very well read, and she was certainly up to date on her politics and everything else. And she had points of view, like how to take care of elderly people. And so they weren't light fluff, you know, they aren't Harlequin romance type stuff. Apologies to anybody who enjoys that. But with a spine, you can say good moral practices with a spine, and how to get through your life. But amazingly, something good came out of everything. Now, I cannot say that I've read them all. In fact, maybe I've only read like 2 dozen of them. And this is in, my father faithfully kept scrapbooks of everything she wrote, or most everything. So and they're at the lake in a trunk. And I've gone through a few of them. And it's like every time I want to visit with my mother, I haul out something. Oh yes, mother, this is how we do it. You know, like keep the faith. So yeah. Other questions? As I told Lena at one point, there is no shortage of words in this house. And luckily, it doesn't take anything to store them. They just sort of disappear in the air.
Yeah, everyone can feel free to unmute themselves if they want to ask a question out loud. That's fine too, or in the chat, whatever you prefer.
I don't see the chat questions, but
yeah, I've been reading them out loud.
okay.
I think that was the last one on there. So
yeah. So are any of you aspiring writers? Are any of you writers? You know.
I actually am. I edit the publication called Church and Life, and so I get to put in a postscript every month. So that's kind of fun. And so I don't know if any of y'all are aware of it, but it's comes out of the Danish Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which has anyway gone on to other things. It's been part of the ELCA now, but anyway, I get ideas that anyway I would sometimes perhaps see if there's a possibility ever of reprinting any of her stories in that publication. Anyway, I may want to talk to you about that. But anyway, I try to, that's why I had questions about process a little bit, because like I also write letters to the editor and things like that, and try to write op-eds on my political ideas of things, but it's not easy for me.
Well, my sister and I have copyright over everything that my mother wrote. So yes, certainly there it can be reprinted. She wrote some fantastically funny things in English as well. I don't know what language. I assume English. Your publication is going out in.
Yeah, it's mostly English. This last time I put something in a poem that was in both Danish and then translated to English.
Yeah.
But yeah.
yeah.
It used to be half and half, or all Danish, and then a half and half, and now it's mostly English.
Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting. I mean, we can work on something side by side because her books are built like short stories. You know, they're excerpts you can take out, and a lot of it. At one point, I think I translated the first 50 pages or something of Mid-Mid for a translation competition, which I didn't win. You know, can't win them all. But it's translated. So, you know, there are lots of possibilities for sure. And the pictures, like, I just burst out laughing when I saw that picture of Josephine, my mother dressed as Josephine Baker. You realize this was the summer parade up at Chisville, where she's marching along in these bananas with all her underwear intact, and her brothers, I don't know if you really saw them in the shot, have these two some sort of fans that they're cooling her off with, and apparently they were more interested in playing, like hitting people on the head with these long fans. But you can sort of see them in the background of these pictures, because I just and somehow or other my mother had gone into Josephine Baker Review, invited by friends of the family. Now, what a young, you know, a teenager was doing, or well, she was just a teenager, like maybe 13, maybe 14 at that time. What she was doing in a striptease review, I have no idea, but maybe maybe they were more, maybe they didn't know what they were going to, or maybe that Josephine Baker was only a small part of the whole afternoon's entertainment. I don't know, or maybe it wasn't that risque.
There's another question here, not related at all, but it is to this current topic, but it's from Lisa, and she's asking if you could tell more about your diplomatic service that you mentioned yesterday.
Oh, yes. I wouldn't say it was a mistake, but what happened was I went to university to study law, probably become a lawyer. But by the time I had been there for so long, I thought, enough of this, I need a break. So I happened to see the civil service exam was posted for the next day. So I just went in and wrote it. I mean, I probably free or close to free to write it. And lo and behold, I passed. I was invited to apply for and got an interview for a regular civil service job, which I failed completely because I was too argumentative. And then I went to the diplomatic, to the foreign service officer interview. And I mean, my medium is obviously mediation, because what I found, first of all, I dressed myself to the nines. At that time, I was sewing my own clothes. And I was in this fabulous lime green outfit, which came straight out of Vogue, if you remember the Vogue patterns. And I was an engaging young woman. And it was after lunch, I remember, and the people who were interviewing started arguing amongst themselves. And here I was, I poured, what do you call it? Balm on the troubled waters. And I think that caused the interviewee from External Affairs to sit up and take notes, External Affairs being the Foreign Affairs. So a few months later, I was one of about 60 foreign service officers hired from all of Canada. And the odds were fantastic. Like, I don't know if it was 7,000 or 70,000 would apply. Like, it was just phenomenal. But none of this really registered with me. I was from the prairies. Here was a chance to go to Ottawa. So I went for 2 years, and I was not the most successful candidate because instead of only 1 year, it took me 2 years to qualify for a permanent position. And part of it was that I was so terribly homesick. I mean, if you've been in Ottawa, it is so different from the prairies where I had grown up and spent my whole life, or virtually my life, like the life I remember. But finally, I did get my permanent status, and I badly wanted to go to Africa. So they spin the compass, and where do they send me? To Norway. Okay, so I've barely been to Africa in my life. I've only been to Morocco. But once I got there, I really enjoyed it. And I had already started cross-country skiing, and I took it up with a passion. I went in the 50-kilometer Hong Kong march, and I have a little medal from it. I learned Norwegian, which I spoke Danish at the time, but to switch it all over to Norwegian so that I can, talk Norwegian. I actually still translate from that language. And I had a great time. I mean, Norwegians are fantastic people. And at the same time, I could relatively quickly go to Denmark and visit my family. But, okay, so here I am at the Canadian Embassy. I am a diplomat, and I have the status of a diplomat, and I thought that was just a little much for, here I am in my mid-20s, and it's like everybody is, bowing to me, showing deference to, I am the third secretary, later the second secretary, and vice consul of Canada to Norway and Iceland. And I still have my consular certificate where Queen Elizabeth calls me her most beloved servant. And we had an incredible status. And I found, oh yes, one of my best stories is the way I bumped into Kissinger. I mean, he bumped into me, front and center. And I was lucky I wasn't tackled by his security guards. This was a NATO meeting. But he, being the gentleman, stepped aside and let me go in. This was just at the time where he had married Nancy. And we got the lowdown from the Marines as to what exactly her underwear consisted of, because of course they had to go through all her, I see some of you are really opening your mouths, but had to go through her suitcases to make sure they were secure and there was nothing, nothing untoward. But, when we got together amongst ourselves, people who spoke English at these various functions, mostly the American movie nights, which were every Friday, we would hear all the gossip, all the goings on. However, my first love was the law. And so at the end of the 2 years, which was what my posting was, I took leave of absence and I went to the University of Alberta, where I had studied previously, and I took first year of law. And then I went back to external affairs that summer because I was earning a fantastic salary, enough to finance my studies, and resigned at the end of the summer, and then carried on with my law. Interesting enough, there was one other Foreign Service officer who started at the same time as I did, and he did basically the same thing, except he was in Zaire in Africa, which, from what he told me of it, was not the best place to be, because basically you were in lockdown 24/7. Notwithstanding Cassius Clay, I can't remember when Muhammad Ali went there and did his rumble in the jungle, but Zaire has never been a healthy place or a place for foreigners in my lifetime. Do you want to know more? We met all kinds of people because basically what happened when I was in Oslo, if ever there was a need for a single woman to fill up a table, I was it. I was one of the chosen.
That's amazing.
And if my ambassador, his wife, was often ill, he needed, someone to fill up the table. When he was invited out, I was there. So I probably saw more, more than most in that status. But I only had one formal evening at attire. But since we never saw the same people twice, it didn't matter.
You've had quite an exciting life. It looks like we are out of town time, unfortunately. Bodil has agreed to let me share her email with you all. So if you do have any more questions, then you can feel free to email her after DACR and then she'll get back to you. So thank you so much for your time this weekend, Bodil. It was really nice to hear all your stories.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all your work, Lena.
Thank you so much. And we hope to see you next year for DACR. Yeah.
It'll be my pleasure.
So we'll all log off now, and then the next person on the schedule is Fidelma McGinn from Scan Design Foundation, and she'll be on at 11 a.m. So we'll all meet back here. Thank you all so much.